Good morning and welcome to the 2014 edition of the Royal Tyrrell Museum Speaker Series. Today, the Royal Tyrrell Museum and its cooperating society are proud to present a tag team presentation by two of our own, Dr. Donald Henderson and Chris Capobianco. Don is the curator of dinosaurs at the Royal Tyrrell Museum, and Chris is a preparation technician, also at the museum. We said they were one of our own. Don obtained his bachelor's degree at the University of Toronto, his PhD at the University of Bristol in England, and did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland. And Donald also taught at the University of Calgary for a few years before joining the curatorial staff at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in 2006. And Donald will be presenting the first half of today's presentation. The second half, Chris Capobianco obtained an undergraduate degree in earth sciences with a concentration in vertebrate paleontology and paleoecology from Carleton University in Ottawa. After completing his degree, Chris came to the Royal Tyrrell Museum to work as a preparation technician, a position that he's occupied for 4 years now. Today, Donald and Chris will present an overview of the fieldwork they have conducted in the Northwest Territories over the past couple of years in a talk entitled To Hay River and Back, Fieldwork on a 370 million-year-old beach in the Northwest Territories. Without further delay, I present Dr. Donald Henderson and Chris Capobianco.
You might as well take a seat. So if Ken's done his magic, you should be able to hear my speaking. Can you? Yep, good. And Ken, can we have the front lights down? Or is that Wendy's job? Oh, there we go. So as Wendy mentioned, my official title is Curator of Dinosaurs, but I'm also interested in an awful lot of other things, including interesting animals from the Devonian period, which is what this talk's going to be about. And so I'm going to do the first half. I'm going to give you the scientific background about the possible significance of this site, and also give a mention about why we decided to go there, what was the motivation last year to do this. So also I should mention that one of our party forgot to bring his camera, and if it wasn't for Chris, we wouldn't have much in the way of pictures. So I'm glad he remembered. I had a huge list of things, and what do you forget? A camera. Anyway, so it's quite a dramatic site, and we had such a good time on this trip, and it was so interesting that while we were there, we thought we have to do a presentation to people to tell them about this amazing trip. So, to get started, this is what got us going. I'd been to this site along the Hay River, or one nearby, in 2012. I flew up for a day because there was debate, were these, another thing we're seeing are tracks. Are they really tracks? Yes, they are. And so the people in Northwest Territories were happy with that. And then in August, we were sent this picture. And Don Brinkman and I, we both looked at it and we realized this could be something significant. It looks like ribs. And it's this part here I want you to focus on. They look like articulated ribs, and you can see a loony there for scale. They're not that big. And it's from this time period. It's the late Devonian. I'll explain more about this time period and its significance shortly. But what look like ribs from a backboned animal in rocks of this age, that's something special. And based on the trackway evidence we'd seen in 2012, we knew that there was the potential for this to be one of these early tetrapods. So that's why we decided to get our act together. And I'd been making negotiations with the people in Hay River about coming back to go look at the tracks. And then this landed, and we thought we have to go. And our concern was erosion, because these things near the river, erosion is really rapid and quite destructive. And if it waited another winter, it might not be there. So we decided we better go as soon as possible. So I need to back up and put this in some context. So here's the geological timescale. On the leftmost, you can see the full age of the Earth. And then in the middle, we're going to zoom in a bit more on the last 500 million years, because that's when the interesting stuff starts. And the time period we're especially interested in for this talk is the late Devonian. It's a period of about 24 million years. And just to give you an idea of you can see the top left there, I put a thin strip about roughly the same relative age. And it's quite a thin slice of time when you consider the age of the Earth. So if our current best estimate, the age of the Earth is about 4.6 billion years. And if you think that 24 million years represents just over half of 1% of Earth history. But there was a lot going on, especially from our selfish point of view, as you'll see shortly. So here's the late Devonian. We really start to see an increase in backboned animals of various types living in new habitats. There's freshwater environments are now becoming populated, and we're getting fossils from that. We're also seeing the earliest forests at this time. So there's evidence for significant terrestrial ecosystems with what we would consider a forest with a canopy and undergrowth. The trees might not be quite as good as what we get later on time, but it's definitely, there's new habitat for new animals to exploit. The Devonian's been called the age of fishes, and there was a huge diversification of fishes at this time in all these, not just marine habitats, but these freshwater ones as well. So there's the Sarcopterygians. It's a major group at this time. There's also another group called the Acanthodians. There's the placoderms. Most of these are extinct. And what starts to appear in this time period as well are tetrapods. And I'll say what tetrapods are shortly. So you've got all this happening in the Devonian, and especially towards the end of the Devonian. And I need to mention something about these animals, especially these fishes. And so these are all bony fishes, and it shows their relationships. It's a special focus on the Devonian period and the types there. But at the very bottom, you can see Homo sapiens and other tetrapods, backboned animals down there. So part of this story relates to not just the origin of weird, wonderful things in the Devonian. It has direct relevance to us and other land-living animals. So the group we're interested in, roughly, it's a lot of people will quibble where you draw the divide line. These are the tetrapods, so literally 4 feet. And it includes the sequence of animals that led to adapting to life on land. And so the significance is that in the late Devonian, it's when tetrapods first appear, and they're connected to the ancestry of all limbed and lunged animals that subsequently developed and evolved. So not just other amphibians, but birds, dinosaurs, mammals, and eventually to us as well. And the key part in the late Devonian is this is when you start to see limbs developing with digits. And we've got a really nice fossil record now. It's really come along in about the last 20 years. People are going to different places in the world and finding in late Devonian age rocks these significant transitional forms. And they're big. You can see I put body lengths there to show you what's happening. So there's good old Eusthenopteron. We've known about that for about 60, 70 years. That's from Miguasha in Quebec. We've got, in European Russia, we've got Panderichthyes. That's been known for a very long time as well. The newest player in the drama is Tiktaalik from Ellesmere Island. It was found in 2004, and it finally became published in about 2006 to 2008. And then there's ones been known for since the 1930s, 1940s, from East Greenland, Acanthostega and Ichthyostega. So all these animals, plus a bunch of others, are found all over the world, and they seem to have diversified rapidly at the end of the Devonian, and are found on just about any continental landmass you go to now. The two the best known and probably the longest known are Ichthyostega and Acanthostega, and we can actually reconstruct these skeletons in all this detail. And the part I want you to focus on are the ribs. And then if you compare that to what we were shown in this photo, it was a pretty good match, especially for Ichthyostega. So the rocks are the right age, and we know elsewhere in the world we've got the potential to find these early tetrapods, so maybe we could possibly find it in the Northwest Territories. So the question is, are these really early tetrapod ribs? Another thing I want to mention is some paleogeography. So if you were to come back to Earth in your spaceship 370 million years ago, this is what the continents would look like, our current best estimate. And we want to focus on this continent here. This is what will eventually become North America and Western Europe. There's no Atlantic Ocean yet, so they haven't split apart. And we'll zoom in a bit more. The other thing to notice is that this continental mass is south of the equator. So the plates are really moving around at this time. And they've got a lot more traveling to do as well. And just to give you, you can just make out the province and territory and state boundaries. So there's what will become Hay River, and there's what will become Drumheller. And the pale white, blues and grays, those are shallow tropical seas. So you can see we're very close to the equator, and this is the habitat for limestone and coral reefs to develop, or maybe I shouldn't say coral reefs, but reefs in general. And it was biologically productive at the equator. And all these limestones deposits in Western North America, and you can see them over in Europe as well. They've been well known for a long time for producing all sorts of fossils. I just want to mention a bit about reef structure. There's maybe three basic components that they all have. And there's the reef front, the reef itself, and the back reef, or the lagoon. And most of us will be familiar with that nice exhibit out in the gallery showing the Devonian reef. These reefs aren't actually constructed of corals, they're mainly sponges at this time. Different organisms at different times have produced the reefs over the past. And reefs are especially important for us, and this building would probably not be here if it wasn't for reefs. The porosity in the pore spaces and the permeability of the reefal rocks are what host the oil and gas in this province and in Western Canada. The other thing you'll notice in this picture is how minor the backboned animals are. There's a shark towards the left, and there's some sarcopterygian fishes towards the right, but everything else is pretty much dominated by invertebrates. And that's the case today. We're biased that we look at backboned animals, but we're just a minority. I think there's about 50,000 living vertebrates out of, probably 8 to 10 million animals. So we're just a minor player. Around the reef you get different environments, and these can be quite productive if organisms can adapt to these conditions. They can be quite warm and salty, exposed to intense sunlight. But there are areas around the world where reefs and carbonate platforms associated with reefs have been colonized by animals. And mangroves are a good example of this. They provide a habitat. And people have thought they're finding fossil evidence for mangroves in the past. But it's not the best place for plants to be fossilized. So it's this back reef facies is what we're dealing with in the Hay River area. When you see the pictures of the landscape, you'll see these flat-lying rocks and many fine layers recording intertidal deposits. Now, one thing you might be thinking is, we know amphibians today are all freshwater. Well, there's one exception. There's the crab-eating frog, which lives in mangrove. But most amphibians, salt water in any level is absolutely lethal to them. So how can you have potentially early amphibians living in marine or near marine conditions? But there's a nice example of this in the Tula region of Russia. It's just European Russia. There's another late Devonian tetrapod locality. It's an animal called Tulurpeton. And again, it's got this weird anatomy. It's got 6 fingers and 6 toes. We all tend to think of 5 fingers, 5 toes is sort of standard for tetrapods, but in the past, in the Devonian, you could have 6, 7, 8 toes. There was no fixed number. And the nice thing about Tulurpeton, as well as having more interesting anatomy, it was living in marine conditions. Because if you look on the top left, there's the Tula region at the same time as the rocks at Hay River were being deposited. And so you've got Tulurpeton living in coastal or marine setting. So if there's marine tetrapods in the eastern part of this continent, why not on the western side? So that's another line of evidence we thought it was worth going to go and investigate this occurrence that we were told about. So I mentioned earlier that the Devonian is known as the age of fishes, and there was an awful lot going on in terms of fishes. There was a huge diversity of different types of bony fishes, and also jawless fishes were still around, but there was some major extinctions. There's certainly one here at the Franian-Famennian boundary, and some people are arguing that there's another extinction at the end of the Famennian, the end of the Devonian. But there was this huge diversity, but only ones that come through lungfishes. There's 3 species today, and then there's the tetrapods, and not shown on this diagram, there's also the coelacanth. So out of this huge diversity, it's only 4 groups persisted into the following time. So I just want to mention, within bony fishes today we've got the 2 big divisions. There's the actinopterygians, whose fins are supported by rays, thin bony or scale-like structures. And the other side is the sarcopterygians. There's the Australian lungfish is an example there. These modern lungfishes are actually quite restricted habitats, especially the Australian one. Just one main river system in Australia. But they're basically unchanged since the Cretaceous, these Australian forms. This genus is called Neoceratodus, and the fossil one is called Ceratodus. The fossil form was known before the living thing. So for our story, we want to focus on the sarcopterygians and this progression towards becoming tetrapod. And this happened over this sort of magical 24 million year time slot. And the thing I want to draw attention to is how the components of the fins changed into limbs. So a more typical fish, most of the fin is supported by rays. But as you move forward in time, here we are at Tiktaalik, it's about more than half the limb is now bone. The ray component is much more reduced. And finally, when you get to things like Acanthostega and Ichthyostega, there's no fin rays. They do retain fin rays in a caudal fin, but the limbs now do not have any fin rays, and this is what people are considering one of the characters to define what is a tetrapod. And it wasn't just that. One more thing I wanted to say. Even at this early time, you can actually recognize the same bones in Ichthyostega that we have in our limbs. So the main ones like femur, tib, fib, possibly some of the ankle elements. You can certainly see the digits, and here's these 8 digits. People used to think there was something magical about 5. You had a central digit supporting for weight, and then these other 2 for balance, and there was all sorts of stories about why 5 digits. But with the discovery in the 1980s of these multi-digit tetrapods, all that 5-finger stuff went out the window. I haven't seen a decent explanation yet for why we stabilized on 5. Well, not us personally, but early tetrapods. Sometime in the late Devonian or the early Carboniferous, 5 digits became fixed in tetrapods. And so it's not just the limbs that were changing. There was other changes in their bodies, the whole body and the skull. There's so much detail in the skull. There's lots of detail that people have studied. One thing I just want to bring to your attention is the position in the eyes. So at the bottom left, we've got a more typical fish like Eusthenopteron. The eyes are quite far forward, and there's this large region towards the back. So these things are gill breathing. Dominant source of oxygen and respiration is from the gills, and they tend to inhale their food. They'll approach it and suddenly open their mouth, flare the gill covers, and suck food particles in. But as you move towards tetrapods, the eyes start to move back. And this is interpreted to be a reduction in the importance of gill breathing, and now you're starting to see lungs are becoming an important component, so you don't need this vast chamber back here for flushing water over gills. And the other thinking is that instead of sucking your prey in with water, you're now grabbing them with teeth at the front of the jaws. Because if you're going to be feeding in shallow water or even out on land, you can't use that suction very well. You now have to physically apprehend the prey with pointy things in your mouth. And that trend continues all the way up. And now you think today, look at a crocodilian, more than half its face extends in front of the eyes. So that's just one of the trends that's going on in this very narrow time slot. And this is a nice painting I found. It looks like a civic painting. So you've still got things in the water, But now you've got these less than efficient looking terrestrial animals starting to move out and colonizing this very interesting early forest ecosystem. It's thought that arthropods were here first, those small insect-like things, or maybe even types of crustaceans or eurypterids. Various sorts of invertebrates were following the plants, and so there must have been an incentive for these sarcopterygian fishes. Why would they go on to land? And it's thought either to exploit this new food source or to get a new safe place to lay your eggs away from those massive hordes of all sorts of fishes. So there's two possible explanations. Why did tetrapods go on land? So the first site I want to introduce is called the Alexandra Falls Fossil Trackway. This is where I went to in 2012. This is the summer with the river levels quite low. The site of a main interest is way over here. Oh, that's Marilyn Green. She was one of our hosts when we were there. She's a really good cook too. So this is what we were showing a long time ago, or 2012, I should say. There's all these depressions. If it was just one or two of them randomly scattered, you'd think, nah, it's just an erosional artifact. But they're not. They're repeated at regular intervals. Their positions relative to each other are the same. The size and shapes repeat constantly all along this edge here. Unfortunately, it's right at the edge of the river. And so the erosion is quite heavy, especially spring breakup. But you can make out the pairs that trudge along, and they continue elsewhere. And also, this is looking downstream. If you look upstream, they've also found other ones, and they're all at this one level. So one of the reasons we wanted to go back this year was to try and expose better quality tracks, not ones that are all beaten up by erosion. And we've got further incentive to think this is reasonable. This is what reported 2012 in Poland. It's a bit older, it's 390 million years, but again, you've got these paired circular impressions that are interpreted to be trackways. And I think the match between the sizes are different. Our tracks are quite big, not our tracks, the fossil tracks. But the arrangement, the relative positioning of them, the shape, it's very similar. So again, if they're in Europe, why shouldn't we find them here? And again, for comparison, here's these circular depressions that we're seeing. These are far from pristine tracks, but I think the potential is there to find good ones. And also from the Polish tracks, they're also seeing digit impressions. So you should remember that diagram. Well, I think I've got it here, of the Ichthyostego footprint, or the foot. You can make a pretty good match between that skeletal foot and the poking in the mud and this Polish locality. And because the tracks we find at Alexandra Falls are so big, they're about 20 centimeters long axis, 10 centimeters on the short axis. I think they're probably being made by something like Rhizodus or maybe some relative of Hyneria. But I think Rhizodus is big enough and heavy enough, and its fins must have been robust enough to make the big trackways that we've seen. And found this really nice illustration. This would represent the sort of environment I think is being recorded in the Carbonate platform at Hay River. And it's some large fishapod, early tetrapod, moving in shallow water, leaving these impressions. So the body weight it's not really carrying much weight on the limbs. It's buoyed up by the water, and it's just pushing itself along, leaving these tracks. So this is what I think is going on at Alexandra Falls locality. So we've got this rib section, a potential rib section that was worth investigating. We've got these tracks that need a lot more work to be done on them. So that's why we decided it was worthwhile going. So now it's the next stage.
All right, can everyone hear me? Perfect. So I'm going to go through sort of the trip, what we did. Like Don said, he had forgotten his camera. And so luckily I had brought mine. I had both my digital camera and my iPhone, and I managed to compile over 550 pictures. So I think I did a good job getting enough for us. And I'm just going to go through sort of what we did while we were there. So the trip, like Don showed in that diagram, we went a far way. As the crow flies, straight line, well over 1,000 kilometers. As you can see, our journey was not straight based on the roads we had. So ours was about 1,400 kilometers. So if you take into factor 1,400 times 2, plus the distance we were going to and from the site every day from Hay River, we were looking at about 3,500 kilometers for our total journey over 10 days. So with this long journey, we thought, hey, we'd stop part of the way up. We didn't want to do, 14 hours potentially of driving all in one day. So we decided we'd stop in High Level, which is roughly 1,100 kilometers away. So we did 12 hours of driving our first day. And I think it's the first time me and Don had really been, in a car together for this amount of time. And so we were trying to figure out things that we could talk about, general interests. And we did find one. James Bond. And so luckily I had the soundtrack and I had all the theme songs, so we were jamming out to those and having a good time. And partly the excitement of the trip and partly due to our mutual affection of James Bond, we got a speeding ticket. It was a photo radar ticket. I'd just like to point out we didn't know about it until we got back. But so we spent our first night in High Level. And the second part, kind of put it all in context, High Level's down here, and we're going up to Hay River up here. This stretch of road is about 350 kilometers. Now, Hay River is titled the Hub of the North, and High Level's little town slogan is Gateway to the South. So you have these two spots and this giant span of road in between. And the only spot in between of this 350 kilometers, the only town is Enterprise, which is 275 kilometers from High Level. So it was a little ways away. And just to put it in context, we have Great Slave Lake up there. And so this is what the road looked like for most of it. Also just empty and with the trees on either side. Enough that we could just stop, walk out into the middle of the road and have no issues at all. And basically any bend you went, this was the stretch of road you were looking at. So if I stopped every 10 minutes, the photo would look exactly the same. And once we hit the 60th parallel, we come to the Northwest Territories, and they greet you with this nice, friendly sign when we get there. We have, you can see in the background, some trucks. It seemed to be a common spot for big trucks going up to Yellowknife to stop at. There's a campground there, an interpretive trail, bathrooms, that whole kind of facility. So it seems to be a common place for them to stop, as there was nowhere in between before that. So Great Slave Lake, having never been there before, didn't really know much about it, but turns out it's the 10th largest lake in the world. It's 27,200 square kilometers and 480 kilometers long. And what makes it really interesting is that it's the deepest lake in North America at 614 meters. The next closest lake in North America is Crater Lake in Oregon. But as you can see, I outlined the Hay River here. The highway follows up the Hay River essentially. And right at the end is where Hay River, where we were staying. Great Slave Lake, you look over it, it looks like an ocean. You can't see anything for miles and miles. This was a relatively calm day, but other days there's full-on white caps and big waves and that. So Hay River, it's about half the size of Drumheller, and it's actually not located that far outside the border of Alberta. It's only 127 kilometers. It started out as a small fishing community for a First Nations fishing community, and then people started to emigrate there about 100 years ago or so. And you can see the Hay River cutting up through the town and then splits off what's called the West Channel, and we have Vale Island there. And we have the Old Town. And so that area down there now is relatively not populated very much. Most people live up here in Newtown. And that's because in 1963, there was a huge flood from all the meltwaters that came up and flooded Vail Island and destroyed most of the homes there. And so most of the residents of Hay River, instead of rebuilding their houses there and having them destroyed again in another flood, they moved up to Newtown. And so when we went at the start of fall. We went at the end of September into early October. And everything was changing there. It was awesome. As me and Don left from Drumheller, fall hadn't really hit here yet. Not a lot of the leaves had started to change. There's a little bit. But as we progressively got further and further north, we noticed a shift in where different areas were in fall. And it was full blown right as soon as we got there. Everything was in color. Leaves were falling to the ground and everything. By the time we left, most of the trees had no leaves on them anymore. And then when we got back here everything was changing and falling off. So I kind of consider myself getting two falls, which is awesome. The area we were was called Twin Falls Gorge Territorial Park. And specifically, the two localities were one at Alexandra Falls and then the other one at Louise Falls. And so they have it all marked out. It's a very nice place, a lot of interpretive trails. You can see all the areas. They got lots of good signage about the history, both geological, natural history stuff, and on the First Nations people, and tons of campgrounds up and around Louise Falls. Luckily, we had Bruce with us. He gave us a key, and so we had access to this. So the first one we wanted to go to, because it had the most importance, was the Lamalice specimen locality. And so that was where we spent our first 2 days, was at this site. And when you first walk in, you come to this little viewpoint, and you get this stunning view of the Hay River and the gorge that it goes through. Just an absolutely amazing view. But we're not going that direction. We're heading down there. We're going to Louise Falls. So you can see it's a little ways away, and we're going to end up making our way down there. Seems simple enough, doesn't seem far. As you go along, we come across a spiral staircase, which is odd, but it was a pleasant surprise on the trip, I'll say. You can see down all the way down there. It made 5 rotations. So 4 full and then the top and the bottom part. And there's me looking up at it because it's pretty big. And so that only took us down part of the way, though. We had to continue going down. And there's all these wooden steps that they had installed and laid down. But once we got to the end of those, we had to go down some pretty steep areas, like this little area here that sort of went around the bend right by where Louise Falls is. But that only gets us to here. We still got a little ways to go. And I loosely use the word rappelling, as it was a nylon rope and a climbing rope, one attached to a root and the other one to a tree. And we had to go down this little area to get sort of down to the site. So I did it. Don goes down, and you can sort of see, puts it into perspective how big it was. The big step actually is about up to here on me, and I'm not very tall, but the entire thing was probably, 3 meters or so, I'd say, in height. But it gets us down here, and absolutely stunning Louise Falls. Could not get photographer's paradise right here. If you look, the color of the water, sort of this rustic color, and me and Don were kind of curious as to what it was, but when you go upstream, all of northern Alberta into southern Northwest Territories is all muskeg, and so you're getting a lot of high acidity soil, breakdown of a lot of vegetation, plant matter, and that's what's coloring this water. And the specimen we were specifically interested in is going to be right over in that corner tucked behind the waterfall. So here's me working. We're going to start trenching the specimen. We weren't sure how big it was and how big of a slab we'd have to take out and jack it. So when we got there, we came prepared with a rock saw, we came with jackhammers, we came decked out. And we got there, and once we saw what we had to climb down to get to the site, we said, okay, rock saw, no way. I'm not carrying that down there. And so we went back to the good old hammer and awl. But they proved pretty ineffective. This rock was so hard, you just felt the vibrations go right through your hand. And for us to dig the trench around this in a site in Alberta with nice sandstone, probably take us like half an hour or so to do this trench, maybe an hour. And it took us over 4 hours to do. And that's 2 of us working as well. If you look in my ear, you can see that I'm wearing hearing protection. And that's because the waterfall was so loud, because it's right beside us, that you had to maintain sanity, essentially. But wearing it, you couldn't even hear what the person beside you was saying. You can see Don here, when we got it a little bit further trenched, the size of our specimen there, that's the size of the block we were taking out to get it out with. Now, when these are the girls who found the specimen. They were walking in this area and found it, Ashley and Amber Lamalice. And so they wanted to come out with their family to come and see the site. And so we figured it'd be a good idea for them to get involved and help us plaster the jacket. And so you can see me here putting down the paper towel. I also like to mention, actually, if I go back here, if you see Don, there's a little bucket kind of sitting on top of his back. It's actually just a little bit further behind him. That's collecting water coming off of the waterfall, so we could use it for our jacket. And since we used that water, it was so cold that it wouldn't even penetrate the paper towel we were putting on. It just sort of liked to sit on top, so it made it sort of interesting as we were there. And you can see the girls helping me plaster the jacket there, and the bucket again, which we were using to help put on our gypsona bandages. And so Amber's the one who found it, and her younger sister Ashley and us with the finished product. Now to note here, once we finished this jacket, we had to then carry it back up, all the steps that we just came down. So it wasn't too bad, but the jacket ended up weighing about 50 pounds, so still a little ways to carry that jacket. This is the specimen as of yesterday. I've prepared it down, but we've recognized that they're not vertebrate ribs anymore. They're probably something like a goniatite or a straight-shelled nautiloid, which are type of shelled cephalopods. So then on to Alexandra Falls, and this is a photograph I took of the falls from one of the scenic viewpoints that you get to when you're there. You can see the amount of water rushing over it. It's over 100 feet tall. I think it's like the 3rd highest waterfall in the Northwest Territories. And you can just see how much it's cut into the limestone ledge that it's pouring over. But what's really neat about both those sites, you could see how close we got to the other one. And clearly the public go there and explore. Same thing with this site. I mean, see that little platform just to the right of the waterfall? Well, you can go and stand there. People kayak off here, apparently. Me, personally, being not a big fan of heights, I stayed about 1 meter away and wouldn't really get much closer. And that's where I took this picture. You can see how close I am to the edge of the waterfall. But again, just like the Louise Falls, you turn, and again, just an absolutely beautiful picture of the valley. So much different than what we get out here in Drumheller. And so it was a much different area to do field work in. So the first thing we wanted to do, we hauled down our jackhammer and generator, and we found the area that we wanted to sort of expose a bit more and start. And so we started jackhammering. Now, just like the last locality, the rock was super hard here, and it didn't break off well. You can see the sort of pieces that it breaks off in. They're about the size of your palm, the pieces. And this made it sort of troublesome because they kept like overlapping and cutting across each other, and so you really had to break it up before you could to get it down. So because we were jackhammering for so long, we jackhammered for actually about 4 days. Don got involved and got into the jackhammering as well. And then we got down to the fine tool work. And what happened here is that at this site, a lot of these big platforms here on the top, they've shifted around and they've been moved with all the ice once the river freezes up, that it opens up a lot of areas and a lot of soil gets into these areas. And so you can see areas that cut across through the rock, and then in between this layer, we actually had this buffer zone of soil and mud. And you can see here Don working, and that's Bruce Green. His wife is Marilyn Green, who Don had mentioned earlier. They put us up. We got to stay at their house. They fed us. Bruce would make us food and bring it to the site on occasion, bring us coffee, and he is just great. And he's so passionate about it, he loved to help us out. And he was more than willing to pick our brains and learn what he could do to help excavate this area with us. And you can see them working there, all the mud. You can see what's on the lower right-hand side where we've actually cleared it all off, and then where the mud's still on top of it. And we get, is upwards of like 5 to 10 centimeters worth of just that mud. So this is the hole, I guess, if you could consider it that. When all's said and done, you can see the mud layer actually really well right here, and how thick it is. And the other one's cutting here and here. And then you can see several of the trackways that we have scattered throughout. And some of them were really nice. Ones like this. Some are really deep, like the one on the lowermost left, but nice ones like that. And it was a good area. We started at the far end, basically, that we could. So we think just heading sort of to the southwest, if we continued along this ridge, we'd find some more. So here's Don contemplating them. And so we're thinking, if you look, right up here in this area, there's probably going to be more heading in this way, we think. So while we were there, we also went prospecting. Wanted to find some more things, more potential trackways here at Alexandra Falls. They continued almost right up to the falls. They weren't quite all the way. But interesting, along here, there's a lot of preserved mud cracks we found in the rocks, which is really neat. And then we also did some prospecting in and around the area of Louise Falls. And in this area, we found a lot of stuff. It was quite fossiliferous, but a lot of the stuff we were finding were the sponges, some bryozoans, brachiopods, animals like that. But Ben Smith, one of Bruce's friends and another guy passionate about fossils, always liked to come out and look around. And the one day he finds sort of these weird looking things, and we're like, what? Kind of look like ribs that we've seen around here. But upon further excavation, they sort of didn't really go anywhere, and they were just infilled with mud. And they had this weird sort of ridge on the top, and so they must have been some sort of mud-filled animal burrows. We had a few friends as we were on our trip. These guys loved to give us attention, especially when we had food. But they would come right up to you. They'd be hanging off the trees, staring you down, eyeing your sandwich, that sort of thing. They were tame, like they'd fly right into your hand if you held it open. They would come in. And they liked to give us attention. And we also had our guardian raven that I guess we were in his turf, and he just liked to watch over and make sure what we were doing. He always was up on his perch here, or you could hear him going up in the trees. And he would come say bye to us as well. You can see him perched on the side of the window. You can see how big he actually was. I mean, that's a big side mirror on the side of the truck that we had taken up to the Northwest Territories. While we were there, we became sort of local celebrities, if you could consider us that. We were all over the newspapers there. We had film crews coming out and talking to us. We had journalists coming and asking us questions. Don had given a presentation on this kind of thing at the library, at the Centennial Library in Hay River, to which about 30 to 35 people showed up to, which was actually quite impressive. They opened the library again just for this, actually. And got lots of questions, and the town seemed really generally interested in it. And while we were on the site, because we were in this territorial park and right on the side of the highway, people who were going up to the Northwest Territories or heading down south would stop and take a little walk around. And one day, a gentleman comes up to us. He's decked out with a big camera, and he saw our truck. And so he's like, "Oh, are you guys from the Royal Tyrrell Museum?" I mean, I'm holding a jackhammer in my hand, and but we're like, "Oh yeah, like we're from the Royal Tyrrell Museum. How's it going?" Making small talk. He's like, "Do you know Ben Borkovic?" I was like, "I hope so. He's my roommate." and turns out Jim Mumferson is actually good family friends with Ben's family and just saw the truck and knew Ben worked there, decided to ask. And so it's funny how it's such a large, expansive area up there in the north, but it's also sort of a small world where everyone knows a lot of people. And so the last stage, we finished on about 2 o'clock on a Saturday, and we thought, hey, we don't want to leave and head back right now. Let's stick around and do something. So we decided to go on a 12-kilometer paddle down the river. And Bruce had his canoe sitting on his front lawn, so he straps it to the top of his car, drives us all the way down to the viewpoint, a little boat launch down at the bottom, right as the town of Hay River starts, essentially. And we decided we'd go all the way down to Great Slave Lake. And as we started to go, however, we start making our way down, and a couple that had come to Don's presentation and Bruce was really good friends with, they met up with us at Louise Falls the one day and ate lunch with us. And they said, "Hey, if you guys are going for a paddle down the river, why don't you stop at our place if we see you passing by?" Sure enough, they had just gotten home. They go look at the river, and sure enough, me and Don are paddling down. And they live somewhere about here, so we weren't too far even into our journey yet. And they call us in, and they're like, "Hey, come on in, have a beer, and have some almonds." So we spend about an hour with them, talking with them for a bit. And then we head off again. Then we continue our journey. And we're paddling off, and these are pictures that they had taken of us paddling off again. And so we continue on down the river. And it was really nice. It was a nice, calm river, quite wide. Didn't have the fastest occurrence. We were paddling pretty much the entire time. It took us a couple hours. But you can see in all this area, you basically see a couple buildings that sort of show that you're in the middle of a town. You're just off the side of a town. And this building here is huge. I don't know how many stories it is, but it was a huge staple. It just sticks out. And apparently it was built because there was a mine that used to exist just west of Hay River. And for the people who were working in the mine, when they would come off their days off, they could live here in Hay River. So they built this giant building, and the mine closed. And so now it's just used as sort of like an apartment building for lower income people. But it was sort of interesting how it just sort of sticks out. And then as we continued down, there's all these barges that we found. And they were so bizarre because for the last 3 kilometers of the river, they just lined both sides. And as we paddled down, we would look at the sides, and most of them had names of where they were from. And most of them have names, some of them were from Calgary, Edmonton, Radium, Vancouver, and we were discussing how did these things get there, and they must have come up and around and down the Mackenzie River through the lakes and stuff. But still, it's just incredible how these giant barges got there. As we move further down, you could really get a good grasp of the fishing heritage, especially once you got on Vail Island around. This is the area around Old Town. A lot of people's fishing vessels that they've stowed away for winter now. And as we progressively got closer and closer, the bigger and bigger the vessels got, which is sort of neat, and we're just this little canoe paddling right down the middle. As we got closer, you can see just to the left of Dawn is where Great Slave Lake is going to be. But right here is this old church that's been kicking around there for a while, and everyone likes to go and look at it. And apparently it still has services, not regular, I think you have to ask for them. And on the west or east side here is actually a First Nations reserve. And so it's one of the churches that they have on their reserve. And apparently it kind of gets dinged up from time to time when the river floods. And so we make it to the beach. This is the beach that sort of their pride and joy. They like to go down here in the summer, go for a paddle, go for a swim, bring out the dogs, the family. Tons of parks. It stretches out for quite a while, and it's quite a nice area. We were happy. We had a good paddle. We were just playing around until Bruce came and picked us up, essentially. Yay! There's us celebrating. Again, for photography, it was just absolutely beautiful. This is just one of the few photos that I've tinkered with. This is right beside, like 10 meters away from our Alexandra trackways that we were excavating. So again, like I said, 550 pictures. It was so hard to pick and choose which ones to put in and which ones we liked and which ones we didn't. And so acknowledgements, we'd just like to thank Bruce and Marilyn Green. There's no way I think we could ever be thankful for what they did. They gave us food, drink. We had Bruce made us Bruce beer, Bruce's Spruce Brew, that he gave us to try, and made for a really fun trip. The Lamalice family for their sharp eyes and patience, for finding the fossils. Bruce for really greasing the wheels and creating sort of a buzz in Hay River for paleontology and all things geology. And then for Ben and Bruce for assisting us in the field. So, questions?